3 times, and at the risk of boring you, I'm going to go through it again because I know that there are Chabad people that listen on the tapes. So, and I don't have a better mashal, so I'm going to use it again. It's about the poker game.
Oh.
So I know you've heard it, and you're probably sick and tired of it, but if you don't mind, for the benefit of others, I'm going to do it.
Size of the boat?
That's right. You remember it all. Okay, so tonight is Yud Beis Tammuz, or today's been Yud Beis Tammuz, tomorrow's Yud Gimel Tammuz. It's a famous day in the Chabad calendar because it celebrates the release of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, from prison. He was arrested and charged and sentenced to death. The death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Life imprisonment was commuted to a relatively short stay, and he was released on Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz, and we celebrate that day because it's considered, depending on your perspective, and we're going to be discussing perspective most of the night, depending on your perspective, it is, if you take a spiritual perspective, the understanding of the fact that he was released is an understanding of the fact that the kitrug, the accusations that were brought against him in Shemayim, at the spiritual level, was answered by him, these miracles of the death sentence being commuted and him finally being released. So Yud Beis Gimel Tammuz and is seen as a hemshek, as a thing together with the Nesius of our Rebbe. Our Rebbe took over in 1950. The Frierdiker Rebbe died in 1950. In 1951, our Rebbe accepted the Nesius to be Rebbe, and we learn the Frierdiker Rebbe and his contributions, and the Rebbe and his contributions as being a continuous thrust, a continuous spiritual thrust. And I want to focus on 2 perspectives, which makes the Rebbe's Nesius, his being Rebbe, and we had Gimel Tammuz a week ago, so this was relevant then and is relevant now through Yud Beis, Yud Gimel Tammuz. I want to try and get you to see 2 main spiritual currents. If you had to sit down and try and isolate the fundamentals of the Rebbe's contribution, which was sparked by the Frierdiker Rebbe, the 2 main areas that the Rebbe made the biggest difference to Am Yisrael's and his contribution were the concept of Bal Tshuvas, making non-frum Jews frum, and the concept of shlichus, of messengers, of agents, lamplighting. So they are the 2 cornerstones of the Rebbe's contribution. And the problem is that people don't learn these 2 contributions deeply enough, because you can learn about tshuva and you can learn about shlichus, but learning about tshuva and learning about shlichus and seeing yourself in those shoes are two different madrigas, two different levels. And what the Rebbe screamed about over and over and over again, when I say screamed, I don't mean it's a scream, emphasized is a better word, over and over again, is that these concepts need to be das for us. They need to be part of your and my vision and existence and perspective. So I'll give you an example of how critically important it was to the Rebbe that we learn to view this as, and let me just go to the end first. Our job in the 50, 60, 70, 120 years that we're alive, that the neshama is in the guf, is not to maximize our own happiness, but to serve Hashem. But the reality that we learn from our Rebbeim and from Kabbalah is that when a Jew is serving Hashem and is serving Hashem properly, then he is at his happiest and he has the happiest potential. So it's fundamentally important to understand these two currents of tshuva and shlikas, because even if one is at the point where you're just doing it for selfish reasons to be happy, that'll do. We have a saying that anybody who learns Torah lo lishma without the proper motive will ultimately learn it lishma with the proper motive. So wherever you start, so long as you're doing, as long as you're tuning into the music, eventually the music will have its effect. So, for example, I'm just taking a random example, which, and for the purposes of the tape, this is from Yud Zayin in Toras Menachem. It's the Maimah on Yud Beis Tammuz, and it's on page 33. One of the points that the Rebbe makes in this is, you and I hear about Golus and Geula. We hear about being redeemed from imprisonment, of detention, of limitation. And the Rebbe was very fond of pointing out that for most people, their Mitzrayim is self-imposed. The whole reason that they need redemption is because of what they do with their lives and the refusal to realize their potential. So he gives the Rebbe gives an unbelievable moshel from ordinary physical life to Golus and Geula. Golus is one state, and Geula is another state. So the Rebbe gives the example of dreaming. That when we dream, all our koiches are working, all our powers in our body are working, but take the example of seeing and hearing. Your ears, when you're asleep, and when you're asleep, the Rebbe says, this is a physical moshel of Golus. You don't know what's going on, it's confusing, nothing follows properly, there's no sense of real order, dreams can be disturbing, they can be upside down, they don't seem to make any sense. That's Golus. That's a physical manifestation of a spiritual state of Golus. In that physical state, you have your eyes and you have your ears. What's with your eyes? Your eyes are closed. So in Golus, you don't see. You hear, your ears are still open. Do you hear clearly? If you had to listen to a lecture on Chassidus, could you repeat it? Of course not. But if there's a loud enough noise, it'll wake you up. So hearing is a secondary level in awakened life, which is Eula, you see with clarity, but in Golis, you don't see at all. On the other hand, in ordinary waking life, hearing is available to you, but it is not as precise an experience as when you see something. When you see something visually, there's no argument about it. There's an accident with a red car. You know the car was red because you saw it was red. There's no argument. If somebody tells you that there was an accident with two cars, then there can be an argument about what color the cars were because you didn't see it. You're relying on a report. But if you saw the red car, there's nothing to talk about. So there is a state. This state of Golis and Geula gets translated at every level of your and my experience. Now, how many people think in terms of their Golis and their Geula in terms of an example like that? Now, that's what the Rebbe was trying to teach us, that we have to view everything we learn in Torah as being totally connected with everything that we do in physicality. It's all part of the one thing. So when we had Shavuos, a few weeks ago, and we learned that Gashmias has to be, for the first time, Gashmias in history became influenceable by Ruchnias and Ruchnias by Gashmias. You don't just learn that as words. You have to learn that you need two perspectives every moment of your life. There's a spiritual perspective and a physical perspective. And those two perspectives are not in contradiction with one another. They're not exclusive to one another. They have to be the same. So the Rebbe uses the example, again in this same mimer, of what I'm sure you guys know already well, but let's revise it. If it's good enough for the Rebbe and the Hasidim, it's good enough for us. We know that every time one of the Ovois had their names changed, or the forefathers, or the matriarchs as they're called, the change of name prevents using the old name. So we don't ever use the names of when Hashem changes somebody's name, the new name is the name that sticks. Now, there's an exception to that. The exception to that is Yaakov. When Yaakov fought with the Malach, and at the end of the struggle, we haven't got time for it now, but at the end of the struggle, the Malach says your name will from now on not be Yaakov, but will be Yisrael. Yaakov is from the Lashon of Akov, the heel of a heel, and Yisrael is from Yeshli Rosh, which is from the head. So in the case of Yaakov and Yisrael, the Torah continues to use both names. They're not interchangeable. They're both used for different concepts. One concept is Yaakov, which is physicality, is Gashmias, is earning a living, trying to pay your bills, trying to sort out the petty arguments that are happening to you in shul and business and everywhere else. The day-to-day struggle with Gashmias, which seems to be random and seems to be run by luck and seems to be run by good fortune for some people, bad fortune for other people. In fact, it's totally logical. We just don't see it. We're not Rebbes. And for a Rebbe, there's no Golis. And so for a Rebbe, he's seeing, his eyes aren't closed like our eyes are closed. But there is also a part of our day, which is Yisrael, which is the spiritual part of our day, which is the time when we daven, which is the time when we talk to our God, which is the time that we do deals with God. Jews do deals with God. let my son get better from his sickness, God forbid, and I promise to put on film for the rest of my life. And by and large, Jews keep these deals. Not always, but very often they take them seriously, and you know, the marvelous thing about Am Yisrael and Am Yisrael Chai is the fact that incredibly Jews have survived. Really, we believe that it's because of our connection to Torah, but deeper than that, it's because we have a common consciousness with our God. And we rely on that common consciousness. And what the Rebbe is, what I'm going to try and explain about the Rebbe's perspective in this is that we don't rely on it enough. We don't talk to him enough. We're in Golis, so our eyes are closed. Oh, you hear some things, and every now and again you get woken up. But essentially, the Rebbe is saying, open your eyes. Golis is self-imposed to a very large extent. Open your eyes. And what does that mean, open your eyes and open your ears? It means change your focus from just Gashmias. It's got to be some Gashmias. At the end of the day, Gashmias is the greatest, most extraordinary miracle, that you are conscious for 60, 70, 120 years, whatever it is, and living in a world sensing and producing and creating, and it's marvelous. But at the same time, one has to understand that you have to have, that's a Yaakov perspective. The rest of the time we have to have a Yisrael perspective. The times when you go for Simcha, or you succeed in something, or you thank Hashem for delivering you from something, from some difficulty. Now, those two perspectives need to come down into Das to this extent. Let me put it to you in black and white, heavy language, which you're very free to walk out of here and say, yeah, but who can do that? But the answer is everybody can do that. Every Jew can do it. It has to come down to a level that you understand at one time or another in your life that you have had the best life for you. The opportunities that you have for your life are the opportunities for the best life for you for the whole 120 years or whatever it is that you're alive. And that when you think that, oh, I've had bad luck, or oh, I wish this had happened some other way, or oh, I'm disappointed, it is a failure to understand what we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, we believe in Hashem, we believe in Hashgacha Pratis. I'm not translating any of those words because I'm hopeful that it's not necessary for anybody. But we believe in Hashem, we believe that Hashem is recreating all Gashmias, all physicality, every microsecond, and that entails control, and control means Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence. So therefore, every single thing about us and about our life, and every opportunity, and every happening, and every parking fine, and every car horn tooting, and every leak in a storm, spoiling a carpet, whatever it is all divinely orchestrated and for your and my benefit. And it's not for our benefit as a group. It's not good for all of us to have ruined carpet. It's good for the guy who's got the ruined carpet. Why? That's not our business. That's Hashem's business. But our business is to realize that that's for our benefit, and then go away and work on why. Why did it happen to me? In the beginning, it's very confusing. As you practice it more, pieces begin to fall into place. You learn about you learn about how every descent is for the purpose of ascent, And you learn that we're going to be entering into the 3 weeks in 5 minutes. And when we enter into the 3 weeks, one of the questions that we're going to have to face together is, how is it possible that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed? What's the good in that? What's the good in you? And it says that Asal li mikdash v'shachanti b'soicham, make me a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you. That's the grammar. Not in it, amongst you. What does that mean? So the sages explain, it means amongst kol echad ve'echad Yisrael, amongst each and every Jew, in each and every Jew's heart and soul. Now, you telling me that Hashem orders us to make a Beis HaMikdash, and why? So that He can live in each and every one of us and in each that Beis HaMikdash, and then He allows it to be destroyed. And don't say allows it, orchestrates it, because we believe in divine providence. So why? And we'll deal with that in a different shiur, because we'll never get finished tonight. So let's go to these two concepts of tshuva and shlichus. So the first thing is, I'm going to bore on in for a minute. We learn in Gemara Brachos that Hashem is bound to keep all Torah. Anything we are required to keep, he is bound to keep. So the Rebbe has a fascinating farbrengen where he examines the following halakha. We have a halakha which prohibits a person putting what's called a stumbling block before the blind. And the Rebbe asks this question. He says, well, how can Hashem send a neshama into a guf for 60, 70, 120 years and put in front of that guf all the temptations for evil, Parshat evil, and expect this neshama to run this guf in such a way that it never ever fails? We know it does fail. We know every book, unless you're at Tzaddik Gomer, you fail. A Beinoni fails and fixes it by doing tshuva. So we're going to fail. So why isn't that putting a stumbling block before the blind? And if it is putting a stumbling block before the blind, how can Hashem do that? So the example that I keep using in the shiur, which I keep saying Paul Ronin's so sick of, is that I used to be a useful poker player 100 years ago. And we had a regular poker game, and for those, especially on the tape, who don't know, poker is a game which has, contrary to public opinion, that people don't know anything about it, it's a game which has almost nothing to do with luck. Although it's paraded as a game of luck, I've got a good hand and then it's lucky, that's true, but it's a numbers game. Over 30, 40, 50 hands, there's no luck anymore. What is there? It's a very refined judgment. It's a judgment skill. There are three variables. One variable, as Ronan said before, is the size of the pot. One variable is the price of the bet. And the third variable is the quality of your hand. Beginners who don't know anything about poker play the quality of their hand. If they have a better hand, they bet more. If they have a worse hand, they bet less. They're the dummies who lose all their money to good poker players, because good poker players understand that it's a judgment, it's a game of judgment, balancing those three variables. So for example, if the pot is very big and the bet is very cheap, then even with no hand at all, you're going to play, because your hand may be better than anybody else's hand, and it's worth it. On the other hand, if you've got a good hand and the pot is very small and the bet is very expensive, it may not be right to play at all, even though you've got a good hand, because the hand doesn't justify the quality of the bet in that thing. Okay. One of the things that good poker players don't do, contrary to the movies, is drink alcohol. Good poker players don't sit at a poker table drinking, because that'll interfere with that judgment. So in our poker game, one day, one of the guys couldn't play, and the host rings up the other 3, 4 guys and says, we've got a, so-and-so can't play, but we've got a fill-in from Adelaide. He won the state poker championship. He's really very good. And please come anyway. So we all went. And we get to the house, and I was very surprised to see that on the table was a bottle of expensive single malt whiskey. And nobody's going to drink that, you think, but it's open. Everybody's got a glass in front of them. And the guy from Adelaide, as the game opens up, he pours himself a whiskey, offers it to everybody. No. And he pours, you don't mind if I do? No. So he pours himself a whiskey, and then another, and then another, and then another. And as I've told this story many times, he lost a fortune that night. I left there, I was dumbfounded. I mean, you know, he's playing with really good players, and he's got the judgment of a half-drunk guy, and we're all at the top of our game, you know, so what do you expect? He lost a fortune. So, and then I'm in the supermarket in Double Bay, before it was Woolworths, when it was still Coles down at the other end of Knox Street. And I bump into this guy and said, what was that all about? And he said, you've got me to thank for that. He was so proud. He said, I discovered that this guy is a recovering alcoholic. So I said, I'm dumbfounded. And I said to him, how could you do that? He said, well, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I just put the bottle on the table, and I didn't offer. I don't know if you noticed, I didn't offer him a drink, right? So that's a very good example of the halacha, that you can't put a stumbling block before the blind, and that when he's damaged, you are responsible for that damage. So the Rebbe asked the question, why isn't God responsible? He sends a neshama into a guf for 60, 70, 120 years, and we're going to go wrong. So why isn't he responsible for the damage? What the Rebbe explains, and this is what the Rebbe wants us to understand so that it's part of our vision on a daily basis, is that when you put a stumbling block before the blind man suffers damage. This guy lost a lot of money. I had to go to my mashpia and find out what to do with the money. It was a very complicated issue, which I won't go into because it takes, but the man suffers damage. What happens when you and I go wrong in our 60, 70, whatever years it is? We have capital in our bank account for tshuva. We have capital as an opportunity to do tshuva. And doing tshuva is one of the most powerful spiritual energies that exist. There are a few very powerful they're not measurable physically. They can't be demonstrated in a scientific laboratory. But those who learn Kabbalah and Hasidus understand that there is as real as and much more powerful than sunshine. So the power of tshuva is a bonding between a Jew and his God. Tshuva enables you to build a relationship with your God. There are two aspects to tshuva. I won't spend too much time on it, although we're doing it in Tanya at the moment.
Yeah.
One level is a behavioral thing, To do tshuva, you recognize you've gone wrong, you confess the sin, and then you resolve never to do it again, and you never do it again. That's tshuva. That's the behavioral side of tshuva. So your son or your daughter at some point in her teenage life does something which is contrary to your arrangements with her or him, and he comes to you and he's genuinely, you can see, brokenhearted and wants to fix it, and he confesses and promises he'll never do it again, and the bond between you and your son or you and your daughter is stronger than it was before the Avera. So, and that strength is built from this energy of tshuva. And what the Rebbe did with his Hasidim was make an army of Baal Tshuvas. Baal Tshuva just means a person who demonstrates, who does tshuva. He took people who were not doing what is expected of a Jew, and first of all taught them what was expected of them, because most people don't know. I mean, I can tell you that when I started to learn Torah 53 years ago, 52 to 53 years ago, I had never heard of Sukkot. Didn't know it existed. I didn't know where it was. I'd heard of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah because my father patiently explained that he didn't keep either anymore. And my mother fasted on Yom Kippur, bless her memory, to remember her parents. So I thought Yom Kippur was the day that you remembered your dead parents killed by the Nazis, right? That's what I thought Yom Kippur was. What?
Still do that because of that. People still...
Yeah, but that's not Yom Kippur. And the first thing that a Jew needs to know is to be educated as what Yom Kippur is. Because Yom Kippur is a very beautiful thing, a very positive thing. You know, there are two... I was once at a Farbrengen in Melbourne, where he's dead now, and he was saying, it was a Farbrengen just in Elul, just before Tishrei, and he was saying that one of the things that mystify him, he was a really holy guy, you know, Serebransky, the first Serebransky. So he said one of the things he couldn't understand is how Jews would wish you well over the fast, right? As though the fast was something terrible. And he said, you know, these Jews, that their attitude is that they can't eat on Yom Kippur, and so that's terrible. And he said, I want you to understand that you need to be at the level where on Yom Kippur you say, who can eat? Who can eat? You're in shul all day, you're talking to your God all day, you're doing tshuva for a year of Averas. You're rebuilding a relationship with your God. You're hugging your God. You're being accepted back with a hug and a kiss from your God. And you want to eat? Who can eat? Now, both Jews are doing the same thing. Both are fasting. One is fasting and wishing himself better over the fast, and he wants a coffee, and I don't know how long before I'm going to have it, and how I'm going to have the coffee, and we're all like that. But ultimately, the goal is to say, well, it's Yom Kippur, who can eat? And this is only a perspective change. Nothing else has changed. The amount of food you take hasn't changed. The amount of drink you take hasn't changed. Your attitude is a matter of perspective. If your perspective is who can eat, you're having a real Yom Kippur. If your attitude is well over the fast and looking at your watch, and it's a different form of Yom Kippur. It's not good enough for you. So, and why is that? Because tshuva builds a one-to-one relationship with the person who's doing tshuva and his God. And what the Rebbe constantly taught us was that that's where your focus should be. Your focus should be on building that relationship with your God and trusting and being certain that your God knows better than you do, and your God knows better whether or not you should do this, be successful in this business deal or not. Does that mean you shouldn't try? Of course you should try. Does that mean that you shouldn't knock yourself out to try and do ABC because you think that's good for you? Sure. But if it doesn't work out, and you've done your best to make it work out, there needs to be an understanding that that's actually what's best for you. That's very difficult. But it became much less difficult the more you learn the Rebbe's Torah, because this is one of the big repetitions, that everything that happens is by Ashkoka Prodis. You and I don't control what happens to you and me 1 minute. You don't control when you were born, what country you were born in, what time you were born in, who you meet during the day, who are you, the friends who are the people who have become your potential friends, the people who become your potential enemies. You have no control. What do you have control on? We've learned this over and over again. You have Bechira Chofshis, you have absolutely free choice, absolutely unfettered free choice on how you react to it. On how you react to every single Nesoy and every single test that is put before you and me. We have absolute free will of how to deal with it. You could be disappointed that something didn't happen, or you can get to a level where you are delighted because you know that this is the best for you. Who can do that? Tzaddikim. Rebbe was a tzaddik. But he was saying, climb aboard. Come on, this is and one of the biggest things that the Rebbe said to us was, come aboard because this is life, not existence. This is living, not existing. You know, the average Joe, Nebok, it's heartbreaking, spends 60, 70, 80, 120 years in this Gilgal, and he gets up every morning and he hopes that he can dodge the bullets of the day and come back to bed and make a little bit more money and not get sick and not have tragedy happen to him. And that's what his life is. His life is dodging bullets. And then in his spare time, he worries what happens if he hasn't dodged the bullet. And he'll torture himself with the worry of it. What does the Rebbe teach us to do? The Rebbe teaches us to get up in the morning and say Moedei Ani and say thank you for the fact that we can see, and thank you, and stride out into our day and know that the challenges that we're going to be facing are challenges that only you can fix. There's no one else who can do it. Otherwise you wouldn't have the job. And the job is to take that Gashmias and elevate it. Some of it's painful. Yeah, it is. And therefore what? Does that mean it's no good? It doesn't mean it's no good. It means we don't understand why it's good. And if you don't understand it, no one's telling you to understand it. What we are being told to do is to build that relationship with our God with complete trust, and when we go wrong, to energize that wrongness with tshuva, because that builds a relationship like with the child and the parent. And that relationship is what the Rebbe was screaming at us that we all have this amazing potential for this relationship. And, you know, Alavai, all of us could be meshuggah enough to walk down the street talking to God. It's wonderful. Doesn't mean you don't have to be involved in Gashmias. And on the contrary, Gashmias is so miraculous that the scientists haven't even we haven't touched the surface. I mean, I won't go there because that'll take too long. But the reality is, and let me remind you of a statement from the Tzemach Tzedek. He wrote a very famous book in Hasidus called Derech Mitzvot Seichel. And in that book he says, and he was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was a genius of a genius. He writes in there that the only purpose, the only reason, not one reason, not the best reason, the only reason that a neshama has a yerida into a guf, that the neshama comes into the body, is for nisyonis. It's for challenges. That's the only reason you're born. So if you want to say, oh, I'd love a life without challenges, you don't get it. You don't get why you were born. You were born for the challenges. Now, if the challenges are destructive torpedoes that are ruining your life in your mind, then you don't get why you're alive. And the Rebbe gave us to understand that that's no good, that's not healthy, that's not why we're alive. We're alive to serve our God, and to serve our God means to take the challenges in Gashmias and elevate them into Ruchnias. That's what we learn in Shavuos. That's what we have to do. Our contact with Gashmias is to elevate it into Ruchnias. Conversely, if we sit and learn, if you're gifted to learn some of the Rebbe's Torah, and you're gifted to be able to see and not have your eyes closed in Golus, then you are able to function in a way where you understand that you're going to have nisyonis. Those nisyonis are designed for you, and your solving those problems is creating building the bricks of the new Beis HaMikdash with Mashiach. That's why you were born. You know, when in Purim, many Maimorim and Sikhs repeat the fact that Queen Esther says to Mordecai, when Mordecai says, you've got to go into the king and sleep with him and change his mind. And she says, you can't just go into the king, and otherwise, if you don't have permission, you come with your head chopped off, you come out much shorter. And Mordecai says to her an incredible thing. He says, how do you know that this isn't why you were born? For this moment, why you were born. Right? Now, it looks like the most daunting, terrible thing that she has to go through. And the reality is that that's the greatest moment of her life. And the Rebbe wanted us to see this clearly, and that's what and you know, when people say, yeah, he's a Baal Tshuva, and Baal Tshuvas stand where Tzaddikim can't stand, these are words. The Rebbe begged us to share this perspective, to be a Baal Tshuva, to be prepared to fail not because it caused damage, but because it's an opportunity to do tshuva. You don't fail, God forbid, purposely in order to do tshuva. But if you do fail, to understand that that isn't on its own an evil. It's only an evil if you don't do anything about it. But if you do something about it, and you do tshuva, then you not only fix the problem, but you build a relationship with your God. So it's got nothing to do with the stumbling block before the blind, because this is really an opportunity for a hug and a kiss. You only got to take it. So that's part one. Part two is shlichus. You know, shlichus was started by the Frierdiker Rebbe. You should know that in our history, Am Yisrael, and who am I to criticize any Jew, and especially we've had so many great Talmidei Chachamim and Tzaddikim, people who died for Torah and Kiddush Hashem, and snotty little 5 minutes from Kremnizer has no commentary there. And I don't want you to think that I'm saying that I have, because I really haven't. But it is true to say that throughout our history, Am Yisrael have been elitist in their frumkeit. In other words, Frum Yidden didn't really mix with what they call the simple folk. If you didn't know how to learn, you were a lower person than someone who did know how to learn. Jews have always valued learning and education above money. You should know that. If you wanted to have a criteria for a vision of self-importance and superiority, it was always the learners. Somebody who was a Talmud Chacham was recorded, and for good reason. If you're a Talmud Chacham, you know what your duties as a Jew are. So the more you know, the more you have an opportunity to serve Hashem. However, that bred a lot of division, and so much so that even amongst Talmidei Chachamim, there was enormous division. The Vilna Gaon wouldn't speak to the Alter Rebbe because his mother told him that he was. So the Baal Shem Tov came with a Kiddush that every Jew is precious, that Am Yisrael Chai is only true if Am Yisrael have Avos Yisrael. Avos Yisrael means love for a fellow Jew. Love for a fellow Jew, let me tell you, it may be a Kiddush to you, but you should know it. It is another spiritual energy. Love for a fellow Jew is a spiritual energy that builds you into greatness. So when we start our davening every day, we start by, in our Siddur, we start by saying we accept upon ourselves the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. And that's a kind of key to the lock of getting Hashem to grant our prayers, right? Now, let me tell you something very deep. I don't know if I've said this recently here or in the Fabricants in Melbourne. The mitzvah of Avos Yisrael isn't for Jews you like. If you think about that for a moment, you'll understand that if we have a mitzvah for Avos Yisrael, it's not a mitzvah for the people you like. There's no mitzvah for me to like Ronin. I've known him 30, 40 years, played tennis with him when I was a kid, and well, not a kid, but younger. So of course I like him. So I'm doing a big mitzvah to like him. That's not the guy I have to like. I have to like the guy who rips me off. Is that easy? That's not easy. That's the mitzvah. And you know how you do it? You go back and do some work. You understand that the family he came from gave him these traumas and these problems and these difficulties, and that's causing him to behave like a swine. You don't. If he steals from you, it doesn't stop you getting damages, but to hate him to think badly about him, it's not fair. You've got to empathize with him and learn that if you were in his shoes, you'd probably do worse. If you had those parents who put you down all the time. I was in Melbourne with some people. This guy, there was a Fabringen for Gimel Talmud, and he came over to me because I was talking about Ahavas Yisrael, and he was on the verge, just on the verge of crying. A man of about 50, and he said, and you tell me kibbud of aim and to love another Jew. My parents, absolute swines to me. Nothing I did was good enough. They compared me to somebody else growing up. Why can't you be like Chaim Yankel? And why can't you do this? And why can't? And they made my life an absolute misery, right? And you want me to have Ahavas Yisrael for them? So, and it's very difficult. But they had their problems. They were Holocaust survivors, and some people have a tyrannical nature, and they use religion as an excuse. That's it's not the religion, it's the fact that they need deep therapy. But the fact that somebody needs deep therapy doesn't mean he hasn't got to pay for his damage to you. But it does mean that you have to empathize for where he's coming from. Now, let's go back to Shlichus. The Rebbe introduced us to the absolutely incredible proposition that every Jew is a Shliach of Hashem to make a Dira B'Tachtonim, to make a dwelling place in Gashmias for Ruchnias. And we are Shluchim to do that job. Now, if you're a Shliach, I want to give you, let's take an example. Let's say that, let's pretend that before Gimel Tammuz, you got a phone call, Zev gets a phone call from the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
I was going to use you.
No. Zev gets a phone call from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, Zev, let me introduce myself. I'm the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and you live in Sydney, and I know that you do work with stopping dampness. And there is a woman who lives in Bondi Junction who's very poor, and her house is very damp, and you can fix that dampness. And she can't afford it, and I'm asking you to be my shliach and go and fix that dampness. Right? Now I want to ask you a question. Would it occur to you not to? Wouldn't occur to you, right?
No.
Okay, so you go to the place, and the door's locked. So you try knocking on the door, she doesn't want to let you in. And when she finally does let you in and you tell her why you're there and on what shlichus you're there, she doesn't believe you. And she's never heard of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And then she says, how long are you going to stay? And you say an hour. And it takes an hour and a half, and she wants to charge you for the extra half an hour. And she makes everything difficult, and and you get to the point where you don't know whether you can get the job done, right? Comes the evening, and you go home, and the Rebbe's asked you to ring and report. So you ring up, and the Rebbe said, have you fixed it? So you say, no. Let me tell you, Rebbe, what it was like, what the difficulties were like. I want to ask you a question. Does the Rebbe care what the difficulties were? Has she got a dry house, or hasn't she got a dry house? That's the issue, right? So the Rebbe explains to us, that's our life. You have a shlichus from Hashem. And how do you know what your shlichus is? How do you know that your shlichus is to dry a wet house? Because that's your life. You wouldn't have that life if that wasn't your shlichus. Your shlichus is to do with tennis. Your shlichus is to do with, mine is to do with, everybody has their own nisyonis, but they are shluchim to fix those nisyonis, right? And that shlichus is a personal shlichus. And just like it wouldn't occur to you to say no to the river, how much more so can it occur to you to not do what Hashem wants from you and me? And how do we know what he wants? We know. He wants 613 mitzvahs, 365 negative and 248 positive. You don't understand it, so what? You don't understand why that woman is so unpleasant to you when you go to fix a house? So what? The job is to fix it. And if we're retained to fix it, that's our shlichus. And it's a precious and important job. So imagine the difference in perspective. Instead of getting up in the morning and getting through the day dodging bullets, you going into the day seizing that which happens to you, understanding that it's for your benefit, and understanding that you have a shlichus for it and no one else has. How empowering is that? So that's the only thing is you've got to make a das. I've got to make a das. No easier for me than for you, I promise you. Okay.
Your shlichut is to give the shiurim for